let's talk about the Percy Jackson movies. So quick backstory with me. I've never been an active reader. Uh, I do read now. I'm not really against reading. It's just that to me, the visual language of film connects more than any book or comic or whatever I read ever could. I have plenty of books. I collect books. I read books. I love comics, things like that. Just not the same way I love a film. When I was younger, my family loved Harry Potter. I never read the books, and I never watched the movies. I'd always seen like bits and pieces. I knew things that happened in it. I knew you're a wizard, Harry. I knew all that kind of stuff. I'd seen the first 30 to 20 minutes of the first one so many times as a kid, and yet I never just got interested in Harry Potter. But the trailers for Percy Jackson came out back in 2010, 2011. And I was the trailers for that movie were pretty bad. They didn't actually show you anything, but it was enough to get my. So it must have been like 2010, 2011. So I was probably about um I was probably about I was about 10 or so. So it was like I was like the perfect age for it. So when that first movie came out, I loved it. I didn't read the books, didn't care. I got the books. I did read them. Eventually, checked them out. They were good. Not books I would ever read again, but to me, those movies were awesome. The books were like whatever. And this true story. 2013, I was in the hospital, and this hospital's in LA, so a lot of celebrities come by, and they actually showed Sea of Monsters, the sequel, in the hospital. I'd already seen it in theaters, but I got to meet like Logan Lerman and stuff like that, and they signed some autographs, and I got some cool stuff. Don't have those autographs anymore because, frankly, I don't give a shit about those movies. Other than I have good memories of watching them being younger, but now I kind of see the flaws with it, especially after reading the books and stuff later on in life. But let's kind of just talk about what these movies were. These movies were 20th Century Fox's attempt to be Harry Potter. They came out about 2010, 2011, somewhere in there, right as Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows was wrapping up, and they knew that they wanted to be the franchise that was going to replace Harry Potter because it was coming to an end. They saw this franchise was $1 billion franchise, and they wanted in on it. Now, back in the day in 2010, we didn't have the budgets now we do for TV shows. There was no TV shows that looked like Game of Thrones or Mandalorian with high budget TV shows. So it was always that if you're gonna adapt something like this, you adapt it as a movie. I've always said that's a nonsensical approach now because these books are books. They have extensive parts to them that spread out over episodes would work way better. As much as people love the Harry Potter movies, I've always said these movies are not that great of movies. And if they were to be adapted into a TV show, they'd be significantly better. I've always said that. So, but I can understand why they thought adapting it into a movie would work out better. Obviously, we saw Harry Potter worked out well. But yeah, it was all the young adult movies that have been excuse me, that have been adapted since Harry Potter have all failed. Percy Jackson, besides Hunger Games. Hunger Games is a little bit different though. But you have Divergent, failed. You have Percy Jackson, failed because Harry Potter just happened to be smart, and it came out right when the books were just super popular, and they just happened to be good enough that they just kind of worked. I feel like if the Harry Potter movies came out now, they would not be nearly as popular as they are now. But that's kind of my thought on that. But let's get into why this movie doesn't work. Well, both these movies don't work. First of all, the first movie changes the entire plot of the books. In the book, the first book, there is no nonsensical, we have to get these orbs so we can get out of the underworld. There is none of that. That is not a plot of the book. That is not something that was in the books. It is filler from the actual story of the movie, and they cut out things, and it's so bizarre because they cut out things of the movie that they literally didn't have to do. First of all, they cut out Ares, who was a big part of the books and things like that, the first book and things like that. They just cut out weird plots of the book to make up a new plot, which is like, okay, so people always say, well, it's an adaptation, you're allowed to make changes. Yes, but typically when you make an adaptation, you're doing it in a way, your changes are made to benefit the film you're making. But I don't see how in any way this benefits what they're doing, right? Like, why did you change the plot of the thing? Like, usually when they're adapting like a book or whatever, the main thing you adapt is the plot, and then you just change the little details, right? You change the little details to make it shorter to fit a movie, or you just cut out things that just you're like, that wouldn't really play well on the screen, right? That's what you do. Like, even though there's differences between all the Harry Potter movies compared to their books, the plot is still the same. This cannot be said for this first Percy Jackson movie, and it doesn't make any sense. Like, why did they change the plot to the movie or to the book for this movie? There's literally no good reason that you could have told me that would make any sense to do that. You don't change the plot of the thing you're adapting. Because what the hell? Then there's the second movie, which, so, I actually think the casting in these movies is not that bad. I think the girl plays Annabeth. She gets a lot of online hate because her character is very strange and very whiny. And I think in the movies, yeah, the casting for her wasn't the greatest. But I don't think she deserves as much online hate as she gets. I think she should have gone on to be in other things. But unfortunately, I think she got so much online hate and backlash for this series, that she just kind of like disappeared. And that's unfortunate. But yeah, she wasn't the best casting, to be honest. But the rest of it, I think, is fine. And the movie is very boring. We directed this movie. It's directed by Chris Columbus, who directed the first two Harry Potters. But I think why those worked is they're very obviously like why those movies worked isn't the first two Harry Potters worked wasn't Chris Columbus's direction. I don't think. I think it's just the excellent, uh, you know, um, set design and casting being able to be good enough that you don't mind, kind of them being the lesser of the Harry Potter series. The first two are they're very like mad looking movies. They're not very detailed looking movies, but and every other Harry Potter movie that came after those first two looks significantly better. So, I think that's the thing about Chris Columbus. Never been a great filmmaker. Even his best movies like Home Alone. Home Alone is like, I don't know if I'd say it's the greatest directed movie. I would say it's like a decently directed movie, but I think everything good about Home Alone mostly comes from John Hughes' screenplay, things like that. So he's never been this great director, and I think even here he just like, you can tell this was not, at least in the other movie, you could tell he tried. This is like very obviously just like a studio job that he probably got paid like a bucket full of money and just kind of did. I didn't really care about, and it came out just whatever. And yeah, the movie just looks like whatever. This movie very much feels like something that Fox rushed out to put out there and be like, all right, we need Harry Potter now, because again, Harry Potter was ending at the time, so they're trying to rush this out so that way they could just take its spot, and it clearly didn't work. The movie was not a huge success, so when they made a sequel, they were like, all right, this movie's justifiable to have a sequel, but we're going to lower the budget. And they also want to respond to fan feedback because the first movie didn't really get a lot of positive feedback from fans, unlike the Harry Potter series. That if you were a fan of the Harry Potter series of books, there's people definitely like, I like the books, but I don't really love the movies very much. There's definitely people like that, but for the most part, most Harry Potter fans seem pretty satisfied with the movies, right? So, but that was not the case with this movie. People were very outraged, and you can see why. They changed the whole plot of the movie, and they didn't really capture the spirit or energy of the book. So, and I usually don't compare movies to books, but in this case, it's very like, all right, what did you do here? And then she gets to the second movie where they're responding to all this fan feedback, and just in the dumbest ways possible. First of all, like Annabeth, she got her hair changed to be a blondie because fans were outraged about stuff. So they're just responding to little things. They weren't really responding to the big picture because at the end of the day, they try to cram multiple books into this one movie. First of all, like Kronos is at the end of this movie. Kronos is the big bad of the books. It's like if Thanos appeared in Avengers 2. Like, if Age of Ultron wasn't Ultron, it was Thanos. Like, it's like, what? Like, what? What are you doing here? It just doesn't work. And it just. Also, since they lowered the budget, the CG just. The first one didn't have great looking CGI, but it was at least passable. Here it just looks so bad. It just looks so bad. And it's just nothing. And so yeah, the sequel just didn't work. It continued to carry on the issues of the first movie, but just like worsen them because they're also trying to retroactively change things and respond to fan feedback in ways that just don't make sense. You're just like, all right, come on, this is ridiculous. So the movie, in the end, was just a bad movie. Both of these movies were bad, and that's why we're getting a reboot series on Disney Plus. This is kind of why I'm reviewing these movies. I just kind of wanted. I was thinking about these movies today when I heard the announcement, so I decided to rewatch them, and I thought it'd be cool to review them. Just have reviews up, so eventually when the series does come out, you can kind of know my thoughts on the movies. Um, but yeah, I think the series is very obviously going to improve upon things because the other thing to note about these things is that Rick Riordan has written a whole universe where there's Percy Jackson books that are based on, and then there's spin-offs on other books he's written that are in the same world, not specifically connected to Percy Jackson, but there's a way you can make all that work and make everything tie in together. And so it's clear that Disney Plus wants a huge gigantic universe involving Percy Jackson on Disney Plus, which is really cool. So, yeah, I mean, I respect what they were going for with these movies, but they were failures. And I think people do over dramatize this movie. Someone said that this is literally the worst adaptation ever made of a book in a video, and I'm like, fuck you, man. I'm sorry, I just can't get behind that nonsense. Have you seen Artemis Fowl? Like, come on. Significantly worse than this. They just like talk about not getting the point of something at all. That character's the villain in the books, and he's not a villain in that movie. It makes no sense. Just there's significantly worse movies. Actually, if you ignore the books completely, they're not really that bad of movies. They're just kind of like not very well written movies that look kind of boring, that have boring casting, all that kind of stuff. They're not particularly anything special. And that's not like a hugely negative thing when it's just comparing it to its book. It's significantly worse. This is why I kind of don't usually like reviewing movies based on the book, right? Because fans who are fans of books are much more of haters than you really would than really a lot of people would like to admit, because people absolutely despise these movies. And they're not really as hateable as people make them out to be. Like, if you ignore the books, they're finally directed movies. Also, I believe there's way more work and effort that goes into creating a good book compared to a good movie. A good movie is literally thousands or hundreds of people coming together and all doing individual jobs to make this happen, right? A book is just one guy, maybe a few other people, might have a co author, but that's rare, sitting down and writing a story, and that's it. Not saying that isn't difficult, excuse me, or hard to do, but I am saying that, even my criticisms here are trying to be fair to this movie and not be like overly hating something. Like, if I was to rate these movies, I wouldn't give them like a 1 out of 10 or some nonsense. I'd give them like 5 out of 10s, maybe the second one a 4 out of 10. But like, they're not majorly bad movies, they're just mediocre movies. And that's what I don't like about book fans, is like, you can be mad an adaptation isn't accurate to your book, but you don't need to like be unrealistic about things, right? This is not one of the worst movies ever made. It is not one of the worst adaptations ever made. There are significantly worse adaptations of books and other properties out there. It's just not a very good movie that didn't adapt your book very well. And if you take the book out of it, it's a meh movie. Both these movies are just meh movies, and that's the way I feel about them. And I think that book fans need to be more fair to actual filmmakers, because I'm sorry, your book is not so precious that overly hating anything is okay.